The other incident I want to talk about is Hudaibiyah. You'll remember that after the war of Mecca had been going on for some years, and terrible things had happened, as they always do in war, the Prophet one day made an extraordinary announcement. He said that he was going to make the Hajj. And everybody was shocked because, of course, when you make Hajj, you may not carry weapons. This is part of the whole purification of Hajj, that you did not carry weapons, and still on the Hajj today, you may not speak a cross word or make an irritable gesture. No violence of any kind, not even to kill an insect. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, was proposing to ride unarmed into enemy territory. An extraordinary, heroic, and brave journey to make. And Omar got up and said, "This is absurd. We have to be able to defend ourselves." The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "I am going only to make the pilgrimage. No weapons." 1,000 Muslims, including 2 women, accompanied him. And they rode, performing with their camels, all performing the rites perfectly. And the Quraysh heard about this in Mecca and sent out the Meccan cavalry to kill them. But some friendly Bedouin found the pilgrims and took them another way into the sanctuary, where all violence was forbidden. And then the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Sit down now." And so they all got off their camels and sat and waited. Now, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was not just a spiritual genius. He also had political gifts of a very high order. And though he'd taken an enormous risk, this wasn't just a foolhardy adventure, because he knew perfectly well that now they were in the sanctuary, they'd got there, if the Quraysh harmed them in any way, if the Quraysh killed pilgrims, Arab pilgrims, who were performing the rites on sacred ground, they would be finished. It would finish them in Arabia. They would lose all legitimacy as the guardians of the Kaaba. And of course, the Quraysh could see what had happened, and they sent envoys. They sent an envoy to negotiate a truce. And there, the Prophet, peace be upon him, agreed to conditions which filled his followers with absolute dismay. It seemed to give up everything they'd fought for in the last few years. He was going to make peace. He was going to take this enormous, heroic risk to make peace. First, there would be no fighting between Meccans and the Mecca and Medina for 10 years. And they'd been building up a very nice trade embargo there, really damaging the Meccan economy. All that was finished now. Then they promised that if anybody decided they wanted to convert to Islam and make the hijrah to Medina, they would be returned back to Mecca. No converts could come to Medina. The people listened, and they were horrified. They were absolutely distraught. And the Prophet, however, insisted. He went ahead, and he started to dictate the terms of the treaty to Ali, who was able to read and write. And he began saying, "This is the treaty that Muhammad, the messenger of God, is making with Suhail of Mecca." And Suhail said, no. I don't believe you're the messenger of God. If I had thought you were Allah's messenger, I wouldn't have been fighting you for all these years. Cross out messenger of God and write your own name and the name of your father as usual. And Ali said, no, I'm sorry. You cannot ask me to cross out messenger of God. I can't do it. I just cannot do it. The Prophet, peace be upon him, took the pen and he said to Ali, where are the words? Point the words to me. And he crossed them out himself. It's a crossing out of ego. The crossing out of ego that has to occur when if we really want to make peace, if we really want to make a difference and to become compassionate. And things were very bad on the way home. Everybody was grumbling and chuntering. They weren't at all happy. And then Umar got a summons. He was to go up and ride beside the Prophet, peace be upon him. And Umar was worried because he had spoken out very forcefully against the treaty and said it was a complete disgrace. And he wondered what kind of reception he'd had. But when he arrived up beside the Prophet, he found that his face was wreathed in smiles. And he said, I have had a revelation which is sweeter to me than anything on earth. And of course, it was the Surah of Victory, which begins, truly this was a clear victory, a clear triumph. It was not a defeat. What had happened was that the Meccans, the Quraysh, had behaved with the violence of the old Jahiliyyah. They had tried to kill the Muslims. But the spirit of peace had descended upon the Muslims, the same spirit of peace that they shared with the people of the book. And it was this that marked out the faithful in the true religion. And Ibn Ishaq, in his biography of the Prophet, peace be upon him, says this was the beginning of peace. That before this time, where there had only been war when people met together. Now, when people met, they could talk, they could communicate, and slowly people started to come to Islam, and 2 years later, Mecca opened its gate to the Muslim army.